Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to gather a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world, one character at a time. And all starts with one thing: a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. To gain that understanding, I am mining the intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy to make you a better writer. This is episode 120 on the Zettelkasten, 3 reasons for coming to terms with the author. Now, we have spent some time talking about Mortimer Adler's book, How to Read a Book. And we've noted that in analytical reading, you have a certain path to follow. You're going to follow certain stages and steps in your reading. And if you're doing syntopical reading, where you're reading more than one book at a time, whether all at the same time or maybe sequentially because you've got a Zettelkasten to help you with that, you're still doing analytical reading, but there you're doing it with more than one source. And one of the steps that's vital to analytical reading is coming to terms with the author. Now, Adler defines that very carefully. You need to understand and be on the lookout for the specific vocabulary that the author is going to use in a specific way to carry the ideas that that author is presenting and promulgating. And there are various ways of finding the terminology, but you really need to ferret that out for a number of reasons, and identified 3 of them. And then I came up with another one that might actually be a 4th. But the first, of course, is understanding, because these terms are words that are being used in a specialized way. So if we just come into the reading with a general layman's use of what that word means, and we try to read through the book with that notion, we might well miss the point that the author is trying to make, or we might puzzle over what he's saying, or how did he come to that conclusion, because we haven't narrowed in tightly on how he uses the term. And when you're doing syntopical reading, you've got a double problem, because now you've got more than one author. And if they use different terms for the same thing, you've got to figure out, well, what one are you going to use and how are you going to reconcile them? And it's even in some ways a bigger problem if they use the same term, but in slightly different meanings. Because now you not only do you have to come to terms with more than one author, but you've got to compare and contrast and reconcile those terms so that they make sense for you. So understanding, you're not going to fully understand a text at an analytical level if you're not sharing a vocabulary with the author. And basically that's what coming to terms is all about. The second reason is that you're not going to remember what you've read if you don't have a deep understanding. So that's a follow-on to understanding. If you have a deep understanding, and if you do the Zettelkasten requirement of adding something of yourself to every card, now you've made that card memorable. And without that, adding some of yourself to help make it more memorable, and without understanding, it's not good. It's nonsense, and you're not going to remember it at all. So the ability to remember is another key reason to come to terms with the author. A third one comes from the martial arts. And this is another Ken Caputo quote. He's full of wonderful little sayings that very compactly say so much. But if you think about it and unpack it, you can be thinking for quite a while with all of the implications. And again, that's one of the joys of a Zettelkasten, is you end up having these interesting ideas from widely different sources. I mean, what does Adler and the martial arts share? But when they collide and come together, you can have some amazing fun thoughts. Well, the Ken Caputo aphorism that I'm talking about tonight is the idea that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So it's kind of a little bit of a conundrum. Well, what do you mean? Are you trying to say slow is fast? Well, yes, exactly. Because if you are really taking the time and the trouble to come to terms with the author, you are really slowing down your starting processes of getting through this book. I'm really seeing it with the Peterson and Seligman book, Character, Strengths, and Virtues. I'm just turning the pages very slowly, and my bib cards are mounting up like crazy in the early pages of the book. Well, it's very important because I'm discovering the terms that they are using, and that's the language they're going to use for the rest of the book. And in this whole first chapter, this introductory chapter, they also talk about their methodology. Super important. So you need to take the time to go slowly to acquire the vocabulary, to come to terms, so that later on, it's a thick book. I can probably speed read much of that book because there's going to be a lot of it that isn't going to be related at all to fiction writing or at all to the character traits as we know them in fiction writing. So there's going to be places where I'll hone in because I know that's relevant, and places where I can skim through it because it's not directly applicable to where I'm going. So you don't get that benefit of smooth is fast unless you've taken the time to go slowly to get that smoothness in the vocabulary. And I guess the summary thing that I would say, it's not really a reason, but it's more like another principle, which is to say, if you're really going to do analytical reading, you've really got to do all the steps. And coming to terms with the author is one of those. So that's my philosophy for tonight. Thank you. Bye-bye.